Oh man, this is the first in-person interview I've done in quite some time, and I've been following this local candidate for some time. She is a Bitcoin advocate out here in Las Vegas. She's running for Congress in District 1. And as most of you know, I'm a huge fan of crypto. I've built my platform over the last few years on it. I'm starting to see this trickle out into the local economy, different candidates who are utilizing the power of Bitcoin and foreseeing that this future financial system is going to bring a lot of value to Nevada and to Las Vegas whole. So without further ado, Jane Adams, thank you for joining me here.
Oh, for sure. Thanks for having me.
I have to say, your tweets are awesome. And I don't know how long you've been talking about Bitcoin, and we'll talk about that in a second, but you seem to be getting a ton of attraction and quite a community surrounding this.
Oh, yeah. It was absolutely unexpected. I haven't been on social media in 4 years. And so when I registered to run for Congress, my friend said, you have to get on Twitter. You have to get on the internet, social media. And I thought, oh, well, I don't know how to do this. So I signed up on Twitter. I put a couple posts up, and all of a sudden, one post went viral. I got like 3,000 likes on it. I thought, oh my goodness, like, how is this possible? And that essentially is what motivated me the most to really continue onto Bitcoin, to push Bitcoin, because I thought, well, if all these people support it, I can't let them down now. I have to stand up for the movement.
For freedom. And as we were mentioning or having this discussion before we started recording a little bit, you read a lot of the original constitutionalists and a lot of those values you feel that we need to bring back, right? Because of this crony corporatism and some of the politics that aren't completely honest with what's happening. But before we dive into your history, I'm just going to read off of her website some of the topics that she has, because I have not come across any candidate locally who I would say is really just emphasizing a lot of the things that the younger generations have been preaching, because unfortunately the boomers have kind of they've got us by the throats at the moment, and we're trying to come up from that. But cut government spending, start investing in America, pro-business, Bitcoin, financial education, K through 12, cyber terrorism, artificial intelligence, big tech, space exploration. I could talk about that for hours. Oil prices, Bitcoin, and energy storage. I don't hear any politician ever talk about this. It's quite amazing to see this. But just tell us a little bit about who Jane Adams is.
So I'm a regular person. I'm an ordinary person. I live in Las Vegas. I do my own laundry, frozen pizzas, walk my own dog. I never expected to be a political candidate, especially for Congress, which is like a really big position to run for. I think the only higher one would be Senate on the state level. On a federal level within a state, before you go up to vice president and president. So I was kind of convinced into it. I've worked in politics for almost 6 years. I love getting people involved in the political process. I think it's the only way we could change things in the United States. It's a system that right now is rigged, but I think if we can work with the riggedness, like, we can really make a difference. That's what people have been doing forever. When I decided to run, I realized, oh my goodness, this is a pretty big move. What am I going to run on? And when I was deciding my platform, I thought, you know what, let me just be myself. Let me just say the things that I believe in. It's probably going to be unpopular. I've never really went along with the crowd. So, well, what do I have to lose? I mean, if people don't like me, then I'll just go back to working as a staffer, as a political staffer. So I just made my own website. Just, at the bottom of the website, I wrote, made by me, Jane, because a lot of candidates, they hire people to make their websites. And I was like, all right, let me wing this. I just started writing. different talking points, what I believe in. And people started contacting me. They started saying, I looked through all the other candidates' websites and I didn't see anything that really resonated with me, but your website just attracted me and, I'd like to donate to your campaign. And I said, well, I don't accept donations. I'm just doing this for myself. I'm not doing this to do any favors to people, do any favors to donors. I want people to realize I'm just standing up for what I believe in. And if you support what I believe in, then great, let's vote on this together. And if you don't, then vote for the other candidates or don't vote at all. But I'm doing this for what I believe in, period.
It's what most people are looking for in a candidate is authenticity. It's so funny that you talk about the political system being rigged because it seems like that's like a unanimous consensus that everyone is very aware of this, but somehow we're not able to break through with it. This is the main reason of why I went down the Bitcoin rabbit hole is that it just kind of takes away that underlying power from the government between the Federal Reserve and the politicians and their donors, which are usually special interest groups and corporations. But for you to just come out and say, hey, look, I'm not accepting any donations. I haven't really seen outside of Bernie Sanders where he was putting a cap on, I believe, like $17 or $36 or something like that, because you don't want to be a slave to your donors, right? You have constituents that vote for you based off of your ideals, which usually resonates with them. But in the back room, you'll be in DC. I've heard from a former attorney general that I had on the podcast, his name was George Chanos, about how when you are actually down in DC, most of the politicians are so detached from their representatives because of the donors and special interest groups. He was telling me that at one point they'd get 12 to 15 special interest groups come into the office per day. And if you are completely detached from them, then you're able to represent your constituents in a fair manner.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I actually love that. Before I ran for Congress, I worked as a staffer, and my goal was to become chief of staff on TC because the chief of staff actually meets with the lobbyists to do the screenings. And I thought, if I could meet with them, I could basically weed out who was good and who had the state's best interest in mind. Because essentially, what the Congress people do, the Congresspersons, what they do is they control the purse strings of the government. They decide how the money is spent. And a lot of people think they make huge decisions on big issues, and sure, they'll vote here and there, but most bills don't get passed through Congress. Most bills don't get even put on the floor. So my concern was mainly how the money is going to get distributed to the state, what kind of grants we'd get, who's going to be sponsoring, and who's more concerned with putting the state into debt than investing in what we have to offer the nation. So I thought the lobbyists are great. They have a lot to offer. Everybody has their own interests in mind, but sometimes their interests align. And I was so excited to meet with the lobbyists. So when I ran for Congress, I thought, oh man, I'm not going to be a chief of staff now. Like, how am I going to meet these lobbyists? And I don't know, maybe I'll outdo my own chief of staff. But I love them. I feel like if they're going to present us with good ideas, then of course I want that money for our state. If they're going to present us with things that don't work for us, then sorry, I don't want your money. Or I might even say, you know what, give us your money. Maybe down the line, it'll somehow work together.
Primaries in Nevada, I believe, are about a month from the time of this recording. If you haven't raised any funds, tell us a little bit about how the experience has been. Do you feel like it's been a mistake? Do you feel that you've been set at a little bit of a disadvantage? Have new opportunities opened up because of the openness surrounding not taking donations?
I like not taking donations because I don't feel pressure to please anyone. I feel like someone having financial leverage over you really takes away from your ability, or anyone or state or corporation or an individual's ability to truly make decisions that represent their values. At this point, I don't really care who agrees with me or disagrees with me. I don't owe anybody any favors. If I win, then that would be really cool. If I lose, then I have built up a following, I've built up a voice, I've built up an influence, and I can take that into the future with any project I do. I also think, and this is a little weird, but I think that all the hard work I've had to put into this campaign, because I haven't been able to grow a big staff to pay, has really, even though it's worn me out so much, put so much stress onto me, it's made me a stronger person. So I know that even as a staffer working before, now if I get elected, oh man, like I'm capable of doing work that no other person that gets elected to Congress will be able to do.
This is true. It sounds like it's a true grassroots movement. How many politicians have said that they've been in the early stages of a staff person, right? Just to specify, what specific positions did you hold within the staff before running over the last 5 years of being in the political space?
Initially, I worked as a volunteer. I did phone banks, door knocking. I got promoted pretty quickly. I didn't realize I was doing a good job. At some point, I got promoted to team lead. So I started training people. I got hired to work on ballot initiatives. That was a big move for me because I really had to learn to talk to voters everywhere, at their doors, in the streets, everywhere I went. And I really fell in love with it. I fell in love with talking to voters. I ended up getting sent all over the country on runoff campaigns, elections, all kinds of initiatives, mostly energy initiatives. That's something that I really feel strongly about. I think that individuals should be able to generate, store, and sell their own energy rather than putting it back into the grid. I think we need to have power over our own work, have control over everything that we do. We should be able to make decisions of. The government should not be involved in it unless we decide, you know what, I want to help support the government national network because I believe in it. I don't want the government telling me I have to participate in their program because they believe that it's best for me.
So you're a true believer of self-sovereignty. This also goes hand in hand with Bitcoin as a store of energy system and a store of value system. I've listened to a handful of interviews from many leaders, but one that's a leader in energy is Elon Musk with Tesla. And he's mentioned before that all you need really is a 100 by 100 square foot area or square mile area, 100 square miles by 100 square miles, 100 miles by 100 miles, my bad, to put just a giant energy panel across, and that can power the entire United States multiple times over. As somebody who is a big believer in energy sovereignty, are you moving towards the idea of renewable sources? Is it just like the basic idea that we put panels on our roof and then we get to dictate where that energy goes, rather than how Nevada Energy has traditionally sold us power or rented power?
So I just want to make it clear, I have nothing against oil, coal, natural gas. I feel as long as we can provide energy for ourselves, then that's great. Energy independence is my number one concern. Throughout my entire campaign, energy independence is my number one motivating factor. I think Bitcoin is the way we're going to get there in Nevada. And if we can do it in Nevada, hopefully we can influence other states to copy our model. In Nevada, we don't have oil, we don't have coal, we have a small amount of natural gas. I think the the statistic is about 90% of the energy we consume here is imported from out of state. I think that is a huge liability. The thing with the federal government is they're allowed to print money as much as they want. They're in debt, they're short $10 million. Just push the printer button, let's go. States can't do that. States go into debt. Debt is slavery. We can't continue in this cycle. So because we don't have those resources, we have other ones. We have a ton of sunlight. I mean, in the summer, it hits 120 degrees. We have a ton of wind. I mean, I'm not sure if you get those alerts on your phone. Sandstorm, windstorm, all the time. We have so much wind. But I don't really want to endorse that for the rest of the country because they don't have those same resources. But I'm running in Nevada, so I'm looking out for this state. And I think we really need to focus on those things. The legislature recently passed some bills that opened up public lands to companies or individuals or organizations that want to build out energy generating operations with renewable energy and solar battery storage or any renewable energy storage. So this is a project that we're focused on here in the state. It's a very big move. I think the problem right now with our energy grid here is that we have a weak grid. I'm constantly going through blackouts. I get texts all the time. Sorry, your power's out. And all I can think of is, oh, my refrigerator, my ice cream. How long is this power going to be out? You know, and that sounds silly, but essentially our electricity powers everything. We charge our phones, our computers. Who knows? What if you didn't save that file? It's done, right? It's over. And we need to stabilize our energy. And the thing with Bitcoin mining is it requires a lot of energy. It creates a lot of demand and it raises money. We can use that funding to grow out our energy grid, and not just any. We can grow out a strong one, a new modern technology one. And I think it would be so good if we could really just take control of our energy. We could not only provide for our state, but we could provide for other states, which would be great. I mean, we'd be set.
So let's say that we were to adopt Bitcoin mining as, would you consider it state property, or would it be subsidized by private entities and then rented back, kind of similar to how solar panels are sold to individuals for your roof? Do you have a strategy to how we go about that, or do we just go towards federal subsidization or subsidizing for the mining operations that are set up through renewable sources, essentially like solar?
So at this point, I don't have access to all the detailed federal bills information, but the way that I'm approaching it at this point, from what I do know, is that subsidies would be good. And, I don't want to even call it subsidies, just grants, just ways to invest in wealth creation. I feel like we've been getting all these subsidies. We really need just to invest in wealth creation in the way that we want to do it. I think private entities, there's something a lot of people, especially in Nevada, aren't familiar with. Just like you're talking about self-sovereignty, is tokenization, which basically people can launch operations and sell. The closest thing I could think of is like sell shares of a project. And so people can invest in it, they can make profit off of it, but essentially it belongs to a group of people. And if somebody doesn't want to participate in it, they can sell their share to somebody else that does. And we can move forward like that. It's also, some people will consider it sort of like a co-op. I think that's the way to move forward. It allows people in the community to participate in projects that affect them. I think a big difference between the system we have now and the system I'd like to see is that I don't want the federal government to keep sponsoring our programs. I want our communities to build themselves out. I think nobody knows better what communities need and what families need than the families and communities, not the government who's sitting in DC, raking in our tax dollars, spending it on who knows what. Like, I don't want to name names, but insider trading, and yes, I dislike insider trading, but I feel like when you've been in the swamp, so to say, for that long, you know what you can get away with and what you can't.
Yeah, that's why Nancy Pelosi is the greatest trader of all time, right? There's actually a hilarious but pretty true Nancy Pelosi portfolio tracker on Twitter that hits the nail right on the head. Now she's worth over $500 million. So congrats to her. There is a bullet point on your website that talks about financial literacy, crypto and Bitcoin. I'm just going to say crypto in general, but there's also Bitcoin mining, which is what's going to help with the energy subsidy for self-sovereignty over energy. How do we teach the youth and the adults in Nevada, which is generally a bottom tier educational state? It's been 48 or lower my entire existence in Nevada of 30 years. Do you have any plans to help teach them, whether it's Bitcoin and the financial system of the future, or just financial literacy of not going out onto the strip and spending all your money gambling and blowing it on strippers?
Huh. So I think people should be able to, I think people should spend their money however they want. I think that's great. I think that's the point of living in America. We shouldn't have to have our money collected every time we make it. People saying, oh, well, you need to pay for this. You need to give us money for this and this and this and this. I know you don't realize what it's going to, but we're just going to collect it anyway. I think that's wrong. I think a lot of people's opinions of what they want to spend money on isn't being respected. And in my mind, that's considered taxation without representation. And that's how our American Revolution was motivated. I stand firmly with that, no taxation without representation. I think that one of the best ways to teach people how to become wealthy, which is what everybody wants, except for, I guess, monks and extremely spiritual people, but I feel like they almost would want to be rich so that they can grow their operation, get more people involved. Anyway, money is important. And I've noticed that the only difference between poor people and rich people is their financial literacy, the kind of financial education they get. A lot of people that are poor don't know anything about savings, about credit. We have all these young people, 17, 18, signing up for college loans that are $20,000 or more. They should not be allowed to do that. That should be illegal, in my opinion, if they have not had a financial literacy education or some kind of...
So would you say it's safe to say that the Nevada school system should implement further financial classes?
Oh, absolutely. I think that we need to teach financial literacy K to 12. We need to teach them Bitcoin as well, because it's the new form of currency. It's a form of currency. It's not going away. It's a global currency. And I think the connection mostly between poverty and financial literacy in Nevada is that we are 49th in education right now, and we have 16% of our county of Las Vegas is in poverty. And I think there is a direct link between those two. We have to break that.
As somebody who grew up on the east side of Las Vegas and went to a high school that was graduation rate of under 60% all 4 years that I'm there, I think the disparity between the the individuals who are living in poverty and those who ended up graduating to a standard or above standard degree was the fact that their parents were working multiple jobs, and so there was no one there to teach them about financial literacy. And at the high school that I went to, there, outside of mathematics and the standard geography and calculus, if you're lucky or fortunate to take that, there's nothing about taxes, about how to do your taxes. There's nothing about creating a financial plan of the future, or even thinking about or teaching about inflation. This inflation has been probably the number one buzzword of 2022, where the 40%, I think it's about 40% of all dollars that have ever existed were printed in the last year and a half, 2 years since the pandemic started and they turned the money printer on. And what happens when there is inflation is that assets increase in value and the dollar decreases in value. And so what happens then, right? I think it's the top 50% of the United States and the world that owns assets, and then the bottom 50% does not. And so it just becomes this hollowing out of the middle class. So I think inflation would be great, but if we can adopt Bitcoin principles, whether it's just through educational forums or actual usage, I think that's the best way to help bring financial literacy to Nevada, which has been needed for decades now.
Oh, absolutely. I know that a lot of millennials have been saving up money to achieve the American dream. I know as a millennial myself, growing up, I would read books, watch movies about, you get a good job, you show up to work every day, you save enough money to buy a house, you get married, you have kids, and on it goes. And now I feel like our generation is considering living in a tiny house as some kind of success marker. This is ridiculous. We can't continue like this. I was reading an article the other day where they were showing images of Generation Z saying, 14 people to a house living in pods is so chic. And I thought, oh my goodness, like this is really what we're offering the future, the next generation. This is absurd. So we definitely need to address inflation. The thing with Bitcoin is there will only be 21 million Bitcoin, period. We cannot print more. That's it. You gotta go with what you got. Whereas with the US dollar, and I'm not going to really touch on other nations' financials, but the more you print, the less value you have. I like to compare it to detergent, right? When you're washing laundry, let's say you're running low. You mix it with a bunch of water. It's not going to do the job, right? You're going to need more of that watered down detergent, or actually a lot of people do that with soap in the bathroom. They just fill it up with more water and think it's going to do the job. But no, you just end up pumping more and more. And that's what happens with inflation, is the prices have to go up because you're not getting the same amount of product. So you have to just raise the amount of dollars that you have to spend to get the same amount. We're just getting screwed by the government, and we just have to pull away from the people in Congress that are creating this problem. Bitcoin is the only answer to that.
Fix the money, fix the world. Whether it's just a meme, a cliche nomenclature, or true, I guess it's to be determined. I'm a big believer in Bitcoin. You're running for District 1 of Nevada for Congress. Can you define the areas that you would represent?
Yes. So the district just got redrawn. So that means it's a different demographic, which is probably why all these new people jumped into the race. I'd say all these new rich Caucasians jumped into the race.
Rich white men, always.
And I'm not saying that in any,
I'm saying it, so she doesn't have to. You don't have to. I'll say it.
And I definitely don't want anyone to think it's like a racist thing or like a racially focused. I'm literally just saying as far as demographics. The thing is that our district is minority majority or majority minority. Basically, there are many more people of color, Blacks, Asians, Hispanic, Islanders, all living there than there are Caucasians. And we need people that represent us. I actually live in my district. I've lived here for 5 years. I go out every day. I live in the heart of the district. I live right in Las Vegas. So I see, when I go outside, I see homelessness. I see drug dealers. I see drug addicts. I see gangsters that walk around with guns legally. And I know them all. Like, we live in the neighborhood. I'm a very friendly neighborhood person. If somebody has a fire, I want to make sure I get there with my fire extinguisher and say, guys, this is our community. We got to help each other, right? Most people aren't like that. Most people, all the other candidates running here live in a gated community, wonderful landscaping. You know, you can shut all that out. Don't have to think about it. But I see it every day, and that motivates me to really make a change here. We have to do something about it. The lines got redrawn, and we got a bit of Henderson in there, but generally it spans from downtown and the arts district.
So where we are currently.
Exactly. And it goes all the way down to Henderson, Boulder City, and then Lake Las Vegas, and a little bit of Lake Mead. But that's basically the whole area. And everybody in these areas mostly comes to, majority of people work in Vegas. We got a lot of unions here. Everybody's on the Strip, working in hospitality, working in construction, hardworking people. Okay, a lot of people here don't really look at the future as, you know, they're gonna be rich, they're gonna be super successful, they're gonna own 2-story houses with 3 bedrooms. I mean, these people are not imagining that for their future. And I understand those people. I get it. I see them every day. I'm working for those people. These are the majority of our district. Yes, I understand the people living in the suburbs. They want safety. And I agree. I want to make sure they have that safety. But I also want to make sure that the people living in poor conditions have the opportunity to rise up out of that, because otherwise it's just going to keep spreading to the suburbs. And essentially, one day they're going to see those people on their doorstep.
Yeah, so we are currently in the arts district where I live in downtown, and there is a lot of change that is happening around here. There's buildings that are being demolished by the day. A lot of renovations are happening because we believe that this area is becoming a millennial and Zoomer based creators hub. I guess would be the best way to describe it. There's a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors that take place down here. So this means that as this place becomes gentrified, the homeless, which is also on the rise, homelessness, are going to have to migrate somewhere. Have you thought about how to help the homelessness in Las Vegas reach a point of self-sovereignty?
Well, that's a difficult issue because a lot of the homeless are coping, or people will call it self-medicating with drugs. And I'm not talking about just marijuana. We have a huge fentanyl and meth epidemic. It's coming from across the border. And I'm a huge border security advocate. And when I say that, I don't mean bring the army down to the border. I mean, we need to find serious solutions for this, right? These people have a lot of guns. These people have a lot of drugs. Where is it coming from? They're not making it in El Salvador or Mexico, right? They have no resources down there, which is why people are leaving. We've made really bad trade deals with Mexico. The farmers are out of business. They're coming up here to do farm work. They're coming up here to do labor, right? I wouldn't blame them. I do the same when I need a job. I'll do anything. I'll put flyers on doors. Just need to pay my phone bill, need to pay my bills, need to get food on the table. I get it. I think everybody can understand that. But where are these people getting the guns? How are they transporting it? We've got crooked cops on the border. We've got crooked people in security. We've got gun dealers in the United States selling guns south of the border, hundreds of thousands of guns every year. These are American-sold guns. We need to crack down on the gun dealers. I'm a big-time constitutional carry supporter. I've spoken out at the legislature against red flag laws. And, you know, I really believe, I'm a constitutionalist, I believe we all have the right to carry guns. It's just our right. This is how we stop the British from taking over everything we were building here. But there comes responsibility with that. And a big part of it is controlling the gangs where they're getting the guns. And we need to crack down on the gun dealers, not the people that are using them in a good way. We have an obligation to protect Americans from the fentanyl epidemic, the opiate epidemic. We have an obligation to protect people from the meth that's going on here. Every time I go to the supermarket, people are like, oh, you want some meth? You want some meth? I'm like, no, thanks. Not today. Well, you know, never, but they're going to ask me tomorrow anyway, right? So the thing with Las Vegas is a lot of people don't realize is it's a hub for drug trafficking. We have interstates here that bring people to every state in the country. And because we have that access, we provide that access, we have an obligation to do that. We also have a huge human trafficking business. Human trafficking, as people don't like to say it, it's the business of rape and selling people into slavery, into work, into labor. We have a huge slave market here. We are obligated 100% to protect these people. We're obligated to the rest of the country. And any candidate that refuses to talk about these issues as part of their border security agenda is a total fraud, is lying, is deceiving the people. If they say all we need is an army on the border, they're lying. If they say all we need is a fence or a wall, they're lying. Yes, I believe finish the wall, build the fence, however, barrier, however you want to call it, great. It's sort of like putting bars on your windows on a house, putting a fence around your home. Great. If you have a diamond in that house, they're going to find a way to get in. And we have the diamond in the house. They're going to find a way to get in. We really have to tackle the serious issues that are causing this.
As somebody who worked on the ship for 10 years and 5 years in one of the more popular nightclubs, there were heavy and strict procedures surrounding sex trafficking. There's signs on all of the porta potties. There were certain signs and codes to look for mostly women. It is men, but mostly women who are in distress and in this situation. And unfortunately, a lot of these women who end up in these situations are part of the sex worker community. I've had many of the leaders who've been helping with this movement down here help establish rights for sex workers, because if they didn't have to participate in this industry, I guess you could say in the dark, then there would be a lot more security surrounding this, correct? Have you thought about anything surrounding the sex worker industry in Nevada? And this isn't just confided to just prostitutes or people who sell themselves. This is anything from cam workers to those who work in legalized brothels to even strippers who are kind of like in this middle ground. Do you think that sex worker rights is something that should be focused, that maybe would help eliminate some of the sex trafficking?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that we have bots coming out, like robots, that I think are going to replace sex workers, at least in person. So I think Tesla is coming, or Elon is building something that's called like kitty bots or something. And I think that's pretty cool. I think it's good because it doesn't really cause trauma in other individuals. I think any human being that is in a situation where they have to allow someone to sexually exploit their body for cash, for fiat that's constantly decreasing in value, that's being debased, I mean, it debases the individual themselves. I think the only way that we can support sex work here is if it's voluntary, if it's like OnlyFans, I know is really popular.
Yeah, and that's a form of the sex worker industry.
Yeah, so that's a medium where people can protect themselves from abuse, from physical contact. So in that sense, I mean, I'm not too familiar with OnlyFans. I've just seen a couple documentaries on it. But just with the little bit I know about it, I think it's much safer than having people walking the strip or meeting people on Craigslist with strangers. Yeah, and absolutely, it's also hard to distinguish who is being pimped out versus who is an independent contractor, so to say. But I don't know enough on the topic to really endorse prostitution.
Yeah, it's not necessarily prostitution. I think it's more along the lines of sex worker reform. Just there is this subtle grassroots movement of just sex worker rights. I do think it's very similar to like the women rights and black rights and gay rights, right? There's always, it becomes a little bit more specialized. So this is just from my personal opinion. I just like to ask these people these questions because in my opinion, Las Vegas, talking about Las Vegas specifically, is a women-dominated industry. They're the cocktail servers, they're the bottle girls, they're the pleasure pit dealers, the dancers. So without complete safety of women in Las Vegas, I think that the strip would cease to exist. A common quote I like to say is that if all of the men disappeared off of the strip, all the workers, no one would, right? Everyone would still come, but if the women disappeared, no one would come.
I agree on some of those things. I want to make a point, and this is not like about you specifically, but this is something I've noticed people tend to do is people class in black rights with sex rights, with LGBT rights, with women's rights. So being black has absolutely nothing to do with sexuality at all. And I feel like people do it all the time. And it's just something that I've realized. There have been magazines that put a cover that says black is the new gay or gay is the new black. And race has absolutely nothing to do with sexuality. I also have issues with LGBT, and I'm going to touch on this, but I'm part of the LGBT community. I'm actually a bisexual. I'm the only bisexual candidate running in this district and running in Nevada, actually. And I was told not to say anything about it, to be silenced. And I decided, you know what? I really don't feel comfortable talking about it, but I want people to know that this is not something to be ashamed of. And I definitely don't want the people that told me to be quiet about it to say, oh, well, we told her and she obeyed us. So I guess I'm coming out. I don't think it's that big of a deal, especially since it's Vegas. I'm not dating women. I'm not having relationships with women. I don't plan on marrying women. It's just something about myself that I feel like if I am open about it, people that have similar feelings won't be ashamed about it as much. So that's the only reason I'm saying it. But my number one thing is I've been doing a lot of part of a lot of programs, black programs, and this is something I know the black community is very, very unhappy about, is being classed in with sexuality.
Okay, yeah, I'll take note and make some changes to the formality. I think it's because the Black rights movement is the largest movement, and then you go to women, and then it goes deeper, right? And then it goes to LGBT, then it goes to certain rights. There was even like the labor workers movement. So there's all kinds of various unions, and when you attach yourself to that, there's a little bit more credibility, similar to, and this is going to be a crazy analogy, but it's like podcasting, right? As many people as you bring on your show, you're sharing credibility with them. So it means that you're, at least for the moment of that recording, you're on the same playing field, which can then change opinions surrounding off of the guest or the people that are associated with all of these different movements. So yeah, and the reason why I brought it up is because it goes back to the idea of self-sovereignty, right? If there's more rights that are given out, then most individuals can be sovereign over whether it's their own bodies or their feelings or their communities. Same with being sovereign over their energy or their finances, right? This is we discussed this a little bit before we started recording about banks. Banks are a hard and heavy issue right now. They kind of play to be the outsiders, right? Because the Federal Reserve could come in and print money, but these banks nickel and dime people for transaction fees. They have a fractional reserve banking system of it was $1 for every 10. I heard that's been eliminated up until recently. Do you think anything outside of just financial self-sovereignty and energy self-sovereignty is important for you as a political candidate? Is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned the fractional banking system. I know this is a very unpopular opinion, but I am very opposed to bank bailouts. I think a lot of people that can't afford to pay their mortgages, that can't afford to pay off their loans, they get screwed. You know, people that can't pay off a parking ticket, they get a warrant. People come to their house, guys with guns, take them away, throw them in a cage. What if they have kids? What if it's a single mother? She needs to provide. She can't get to work. They take her kids away. This is absurd. Meanwhile, we have these huge banking corporations, these huge insurance companies that can lose billions and billions of dollars. And then the federal government is using taxpayer dollars to rescue them and save them. And then they're saying, oh, well, we can't use our taxpayer dollars to save Americans. And I'm not saying we need to use our taxpayer dollars to save Americans, but we cannot be doing that for these big banks. And I think the Fed is really getting away with too much. But also, the Fed is doing their job at making profit. So I'm not blaming the Fed, but I'm opposing what they're doing. I think what they're doing, they're really good at their job. I think corporations are really good at their job. But we are the shareholders of the American government. We really need to speak up against it. I agree with self-sovereignty. That's why I believe that every individual needs to realize that we have power and we need to use that power to, stand up for ourselves. We need to do the same thing that those successful corporations that the Fed is doing. We need to apply those principles to ourselves and create a movement.
There's many ways to display your power, right? We have the power of vote. You have the power of financial decisions. You have a power of voice and power of action. I'm sure there's a few other ones. As let's say Jane Addams is elected, you win the primary, and then you find yourself in Congress. There is a small but emerging committees that are focused on crypto initiatives. Have you been following these at all? And do you plan on forming any sort of Bitcoin policy while in office?
I've been following a little bit of it. I know that right now things are being brought to attention that are less about Bitcoin and more about regulating the cryptocurrency industry in general, especially with the recent stablecoin situation. I don't want to be too specific about it because people are very sensitive. But let's just say it was a terrible situation.
Yeah, it's actually It's unfortunate it brought the crypto markets down. It was about $50 billion in capital destruction, and from the peak to the bottom, it in total capital was larger than the Enron catastrophe. So it might have been one of the largest capital destruction moments in history.
Yeah, it was devastating, and I think the government is definitely going to be testing the community, or I'd say cryptocurrency. Bitcoin, they've had a pretty hard time challenging. I remember seeing a thing with like a video clip with Janet Yellen talking about cryptocurrency, about Bitcoin specifically, and I remember watching a documentary that word for word said the same thing, and she copied it. I thought, wow, everybody's praising her for understanding, but somebody literally copied word for word. And I actually made a little clip of it, but I felt I didn't want to ruin people's hope, so I didn't post it online. But because I want a lot of ordinary Americans to get inspired by Bitcoin, and I think a lot of people look up to Janet Yellen, and I'd rather them be positively inspired by her message about Bitcoin than feel like what she's saying is fraudulent. So I think there's like give and take with those things. And yeah, they're going to be testing everything. We need to focus on Bitcoin. I would love to be a part of committees that have to do with Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies. I'd really like to maybe get some more feedback and put some input into what the SEC is doing. But at this point, they are a runaway train, just like, in my opinion, Congress is right now. I know if I get elected to Congress, I'm new, I'm controversial. They're not going to give me any time or any voice to say anything at all. So I'm not going to challenge that too much. I really just want to focus on making Nevada a role model and how we can move things forward in this country.
Nevada has been a leader in some sort of crypto, I wouldn't say innovation, but they did adopt the definition of crypto and taxation and establishing it as property. I believe that was in like 2018 or 2017. There have been movements. Governor Sisolak also was going to, or had the stamp of approval originally before the plans fell apart, of creating a crypto city out in the middle of the desert in Nevada, which was owned by the people over at Blockchain Inc. And then there was another, I think it was Peter Thiel was also going to purchase more property and do something very similar. Unfortunately, both those fell apart. I think it had to do with with disposal and waste and trash issues of literally being out in the desert. So there is some established history out here in Las Vegas. I've been covering crypto for now about 2 years, and we've seen a lot of movements, specifically in the tourist areas. We have Crazy Horse 3 now accepts Bitcoin for lap dances. We have MGM has now moved into NFTs. They've launched a Jabberwocky's NFT experience. Resorts World has announced that they're partnering with Gemini Exchange for a cashless system, and they've announced that they are utilizing Theta blockchain for NFTs and ticketing. I know your main premise is Bitcoin. Vegas, although, has been moving subtly as NFT pioneers and NFT leaders, because NFTs have become heavily associated with membership, access tokens, rewards, and and social entertainment, yeah, and social exclusivity, right? Like social status. Yeah. And to me, it seems like this is a perfect fit for Nevada specifically. We know that Mayor Suarez has been doing an incredible job down in Miami, bringing Bitcoin to mainstream adoption. We know Texas is leading in Bitcoin mining. Governor Abbott has said that the Bitcoin mining is going to revolutionize the Texas power grid, which has been having a lot of issues. Wyoming has been doing great job for years now, 5-6 years in crypto policy and legislation. And so as it becomes, as crypto moves further out west and becomes more adopted, it seems like it becomes more focused on like the creators and like as a progressive playground for crypto rather than Bitcoin, which we know is the most decentralized and safe. Have you thought anything about this, or have you been following these at all? Or is the focus just Bitcoin because we need to have a solid foundation before we can move into anything else?
I'm definitely focused on Bitcoin as far as policy goes. I think it's the most reliable, it's safe. I definitely do not want to present any options on a federal level to Americans that might put them at risk. I think any cryptocurrencies that people want to get involved in for their businesses, for their companies, organizations, corporations, of course, do whatever you want. But there is no way I will ever endorse something like that on a policy level. I think everybody should be able to spend their money however they want, like I was saying earlier. I think NFTs are very popular. Like you were saying in Vegas, it's a huge movement. I think Crazy Horse. I think Crazy Horse. I think those venues accepting Bitcoin is great. It's a really good way for independent contractors, gig workers to accept Bitcoin as an investment and save up rather than try to convert fiat into Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. We have a huge gig work economy here. A lot of independent contractors, small businesses. It's so much easier if they accept Bitcoin to start saving. I also think that with all the casinos, all the hotels, the resorts, it's really good that they're expanding in the cryptocurrency space. It's opening up people's minds to technology, decentralized technology, which is amazing. I think essentially it'll always lead people back to Bitcoin.
I've been hosting crypto meetups in Vegas and collab with UNLV in the city for a little over a year now. And we had some gaming control board members come to the meetup, and we've had conversations with them. The first thing we talked about was Bitcoin and crypto gambling. There is, as far as we know, and from the conversations we had, a pretty large red tape that's covering that. Of course, one of their issues is gambling addiction. They brought up this idea of this like psychological barrier where if you're gambling with 4 Bitcoin on a craps table, it's very easy for somebody to lose focus that might be worth $200,000 or whatever the volatile price is at the time. And also the second was that the KYC procedure for source of funds. And we were just having this pretty in-depth discussion about no matter how far you go back, all of Bitcoin or the majority of it will go back to Mt. Gox or Silk Road, which has a pretty dark past. Do you see any other applications of Bitcoin in Nevada? We don't have to say just Vegas, that could be a pretty good use case and help further increase innovation and generate revenue in Nevada outside of just the obvious one of Bitcoin on the poker table or the blackjack table?
Yeah, I think we should be backing our banks with Bitcoin. It's a good security. We're the number one mining state for gold, and we need to start mining the new gold, which is Bitcoin. If we can back our banks with Bitcoin, we will be able to give loans to small businesses or innovators that want to create businesses with new technology. We don't have to charge them interest because we're constantly going to be growing the bag, so to say. We're going to be making more money off of just having the Bitcoin there. And I think that's what we need. I feel like when banks charge interest on loans, the interest is actually money that hasn't been invented yet, hasn't been created yet. So in order for people to pay that interest, the Fed constantly has to keep printing money. And it just propagates the whole money printing deflationary system or inflationary system, sorry. And Bitcoin creates the opposite, it's deflationary. So not only will we be bringing innovation to the state, we'll be educating people on how not to create inflation, be more responsible with money, and we could be leaders in the whole country when it comes to energy generation, new technology. A majority of the energy we spend here in Nevada is on transportation. If we can convert a lot of our energy spending away from transportation and into new innovation, we can really have a lot going for us here. And it's not that difficult considering we have uranium here, we have lithium mines here, geothermal energy, and also we have the nuclear repository that already by law has been confirmed to be the repository. And there are a lot of so-called environmentalists that are opposed to it, but I'm an environmentalist. I'm vegan, I ride a bicycle, or I ride share. I actually don't want to use oil. I don't use plastic bags from supermarkets. I use reusable bags. And I mean, these are small things, but it's me demonstrating that I am a true environmentalist. And so for me to say that I support nuclear and nuclear recycling is a true statement by a true environmentalist. So anybody that's opposed to that is not really an environmentalist. They have some other interests in mind. We have a lot of use for Bitcoin here. I see it mostly for innovation and backing the banks and interest-free loans to startups.
So I could see through that response, there's this positive feedback loop that I can see you envisioning. I don't have it completely here, but we have all of these natural resources outside of nuclear, but all of the different mines that are being excavated and dug up. Would you say that it's something along the lines of having each of these natural resource miners and energy resources dedicate a small portion of their funds or their energy to setting up Bitcoin miners and then generating that, and then that's what goes into backing these banks? And of course there could be some sort of like public and private subsidy, but is that something that you see that would help Nevada, or am I making this up?
So I think that would be more of a state legislature issue, because I know Fort Worth in Texas started mining their own Bitcoin, and I would not be at all involved on the city or state level. But it's something that I encourage. I think we need to be investing into backing our banks. We have to. We cannot continue on this FDIC insured. FDIC insured basically says the federal government or the Fed will back us, but they have no money.
Right. So moving away from Keynesian policies and into Austrian economics is essentially like, that's what Austrian economics, if you've read, what's the book by Safi Dean? That was the first Bitcoin book that I'd ever read, and it just talks about how that's what the gold standard was, of backing the dollar 1-to-1 with gold. If we could back the US dollar or whatever it is with Bitcoin, or full Bitcoin or partial Bitcoin, is to be determined, but to have some of that like stopgap there would be very important. But wouldn't you fear, though, we did mention that banks definitely act within their own self-interest. If we do back it with Bitcoin, wouldn't there be a fear that they would then act in their own self-interest as usual, and maybe misplace that Bitcoin or not use it to the right discretion? Do you have no fear of that?
Well, I'm mostly referring to state banks. I think the states When I say state, I don't mean like the federal government as a state, the state. I mean, on a state level, I think we really need to become independent from the federal government. I think the federal government has gone off to do their own thing. They really don't care what we think anymore. They're powerful. They don't care if we oppose anything they say. They'll just throw us into prison, silence us. Now they have the disinformation, the Ministry of Truth. They're basically trying to decide and dictate to us what is true and what is false. So in my opinion, we need to pull away from the federal government. We need to invest in the state, in the banks, just become
self-sovereignty, top to bottom, bottom to up approach. So once sovereignty from the state, from the federal government, we want energy sovereignty for the individual, financial literacy for the individual, so they can be sovereign individual and spend their money at their own decisions. So
yeah,
and that's sounds like a constitutionalist mindset.
Absolutely.
One last question before we get out of here. You are running as a Republican. Was there a reason why you chose the Republican Party? Have you always been a Republican? I know Bitcoiners kind of go back and forth between being Republicans, Democrats, although it is inherently a libertarian ideal. It seems like we're kind of spread across the board. So I'm just curious of the reasoning to have the Republican Party behind you.
So when I was a teenager, I thought the Democrat Party was really cool, right? They have
That's
really
most
cool
of us.
marketing, cool branding. You know, they're hip. They're like, oh yeah, we're all in this together. And the Republicans are just these not cool people that just want to oppress everybody. And I thought, well, yeah, that's what the messaging says. I think Republicans have awful messaging, comes across as very racist, ignorant, uptight, just horrible messaging. But when I looked past the messaging, I really was drawn in by the Constitution. And I noticed that Republicans are very obsessed with the Constitution. I thought it was because the Constitution was racist and was just trying to keep white people in power. But when I really started studying the Constitution, I realized that it was created for us. It outlines that the government is untrustworthy, and that in order to stay independent or be independent, we need to be able to defend ourselves from the government, because their intent is to rule us and overpower us. And everything that I basically started reading about it, I realized, oh, wow, this is why we have laws about warrants. This is why we have laws about soldiers not living in our home. This is all to protect us from when the government does try to take control. And I see that every day. I see the government just having more and more and more and more power, because the Democrat Party keeps saying, oh, well, we're here for you. We're part of your team. Just vote for us, and we're just going to keep creating these laws to protect you. They're invasive, but it's good for you. Meanwhile, I see our budget just the deficit growing, but I see the politicians becoming wealthier. And so clearly there's not a problem with balancing our budget. I mean, they're multimillionaires. They know how to balance a budget. They just don't care about balancing the budget of the American people. And so that's when I fell in love with the Constitution. I wasn't really too familiar with it at the beginning, but I thought, you know what? Let me kind of check it out. And then the more I got to know it, I realized if the Constitution is about pushing the government out of our lives, then that's what I'm going to support. And the Republican Party is the only one that's really backing the Constitution.
Well put. Well, Jane, I just want to thank you for coming on, for being fearless, for running and stepping out of the traditional political lines and standing up for things that you believe in and running for that platform. For those who are listening and watching that live in Nevada, how do they follow you? How do they vote for you in the primary? What are some things to look out for?
So to find out everything about my platform, go to my website, Jane Addams. That's JaneAdams, like the president, but the girl version. JaneAdams.us. If you want to contact me directly, go on Twitter. My handle is I love Jane Addams. And just message me. I reply to all my direct messages. I'd love to hear from you. Again, I don't accept any donations, so I don't want your money, but I would love your support. I would love to hear from you.
You guys heard it here first. Jane, thank you again. And thank all of you for listening and watching. We'll catch you next time.